My name is Sarah, and on what was supposed to be the most beautiful day of my life, my own sister grabbed my wedding dress and threw it directly into a mud puddle. Standing there in my underwear 30 minutes before, I was supposed to walk down the aisle, watching my dream dress soaking in dirty water. I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of crying or screaming or falling apart like everyone expected, I smiled. Because what my family didn't know was that their years of treating me like garbage had already given me the motivation to build something incredible. If you've ever been betrayed by the people who were supposed to love you most, stay with me. Drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button because what happened next will shock you. Growing up as the middle child in the Morrison family meant living in a constant state of invisibility. My older sister, Jessica, was the golden child, captain of the cheerleading squad, homecoming queen, the daughter who could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. My younger brother, Tyler, was the baby, coddled and protected, his every mistake excused as just being young. And then there was me, Sarah, the forgotten one stuck in between their perfect bookends. Our house on Elm Street looked picture perfect from the outside. White picket fence, manicured lawn, the kind of suburban dream that screams successful family. But inside those walls, a different story played out daily. My mother, Linda, would spend hours fussing over Jessica's hair before school, making sure every curl was perfect. She would pack Tyler elaborate lunches with little notes telling him how special he was. For me, she would barely glance up from her coffee as I grabbed whatever I could find in the refrigerator. My father, David, was no better. Jessica's soccer games were mandatory family events, complete with professional photography and celebration dinners afterward. Tyler's little league games received the same treatment. But when I made the debate team and competed at state championships, my parents were always too busy to attend. Work obligations, they claimed. Jessica had a hair appointment. Tyler had a friend's birthday party. There was always something more important than supporting me. The pattern established itself early and never wavered. When Jessica got her first car at 16, it was a brand new Honda Civic with all the bells and whistles. When Tyler turned 16, he received a slightly used but still impressive Ford Explorer. When my 16th birthday arrived, I was told the family budget was tight that year. Maybe next year, they promised. Next year never came. College applications revealed the true depth of their favoritism. Jessica's applications to expensive private universities were encouraged and funded without question. My parents hired a college consultant, paid for SAT prep courses, and toured campuses across 3 states with her. When I expressed interest in attending the state university, I was told I would need to figure out the financial aid myself. Smart girls like you can get scholarships, my mother said dismissively. You don't need us holding your hand through everything. So I did exactly that. I researched scholarships, wrote essays until my fingers cramped, and worked part-time jobs to save money for application fees. While Jessica partied her way through high school, secure in the knowledge that her future was guaranteed, I spent nights in the library and weekends at various jobs. The local coffee shop, a retail store at the mall, tutoring younger students, babysitting for neighbors. Every dollar I earned went into my college fund. The rejection from my dream school stung, but the acceptance letter from State University felt like victory. I had done it entirely on my own, without a single dollar or ounce of emotional support from my family. My parents attended Jessica's high school graduation with flowers and tears of pride. They mumbled congratulations at mine before rushing home to watch Tyler's baseball game. College became my escape and my awakening. Away from the toxic dynamic of constant comparison, I flourished academically and socially. I majored in business with a focus on marketing, joined student organizations, and for the first time in my life, felt valued for who I was rather than dismissed for who I wasn't. My professors recognized my potential. My classmates respected my ideas, and I began to understand that the problem wasn't me. The problem was them. During my junior year, I started a small side business creating social media content for local restaurants near campus. What began as a way to earn extra spending money quickly grew into something more substantial. I had a natural eye for photography and an intuitive understanding of what made content engaging. Word spread, and soon I was managing social media accounts for a dozen small businesses throughout the college town. The money was decent, but more importantly, I loved the work. Creating content that helped small business owners connect with customers, watching their engagement numbers grow, seeing the direct impact of my efforts on their bottom line gave me a satisfaction I had never experienced. This wasn't just a job or even a career path. This was my calling. By senior year, my little side business had grown into something that required serious time management. I was pulling all-nighters not just for studying, but for client work. My professors noticed my exhaustion and declining class attendance. One particularly observant marketing professor, Dr. Williams, called me into her office for what I expected to be a lecture about priorities. Instead, she offered perspective that changed everything. "Sarah," she said, looking at me with genuine concern, "I've been watching you juggle more than any student should have to handle. But I've also been watching the quality of work you produce under pressure. And frankly, it's exceptional. Have you considered that what you're building might be more valuable than what you're studying?" The conversation that followed lasted 2 hours. Dr. Williams helped me see that my business wasn't just a college side hustle. It was a legitimate company with real potential for growth. She introduced me to concepts I had never considered, like scaling operations, building systems, and long-term strategic planning. She gave me business books that opened my mind to possibilities I had never imagined. More importantly, she helped me understand that success doesn't always follow traditional paths. Some people find their calling in corporate structures, climbing ladders within established companies. Others, like me, are natural entrepreneurs who thrive on building something from nothing. The key is recognizing which type you are and having the courage to pursue the path that fits. That night, I called my parents to share my excitement about the business and Dr. Williams' encouragement. My mother's response was predictable. "Oh, Sarah," she sighed, "always trying to be different. Why can't you just focus on getting good grades and finding a nice corporate job like normal people? Your sister Jessica just got promoted again at her marketing firm. Maybe you should ask her for advice about real career planning." My father was even more dismissive. "Playing around on the computer isn't a business, Sarah. It's a hobby that's distracting you from your education. We're not paying for college, so you can waste time on social media nonsense. Get serious about your future." Their lack of support stung, but it also crystallized something important for me. I had spent 18 years seeking their approval, trying to earn the love and recognition they gave so freely to Jessica and Tyler. But their inability to see my potential wasn't a reflection of my worth. It was a limitation of their vision. That conversation marked the end of my attempts to gain their validation and the beginning of my journey toward building something they could never take credit for or diminish. I stopped calling them with updates about my business. I stopped seeking their advice or approval. I focused entirely on growing my company and proving to myself what I was capable of achieving. The business grew steadily throughout my final semester. By graduation, I had 15 regular clients and a waiting list of potential new customers. While my classmates worried about job interviews and entry-level salaries, I was calculating revenue projections and planning expansion strategies. The future looked bright, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly confident about the path ahead. What I didn't realize was that my family's pattern of dismissing and undermining me was far from over. In fact, the worst betrayal was still to come, and it would happen on what should have been the happiest day of my life. 2 years after graduation, my business had exploded beyond my wildest expectations. What started as managing social media for a few local restaurants had evolved into a full-service digital marketing agency. I had 12 employees working out of a sleek downtown office, and our client roster included some of the most recognizable brands in the region. The shy, invisible middle child had built something remarkable, and the financial success that came with it was staggering. By age 25, I was pulling in over 6 figures annually, with the business valued at well over $1 million. I owned a beautiful condo downtown, drove a car I had dreamed about since high school, and traveled to conferences around the world. But perhaps most importantly, I had built a team of people who respected my vision and trusted my leadership. For someone who had grown up feeling worthless and overlooked, leading a successful company felt like the ultimate validation. During this period of rapid growth, I met David Chen at a networking event for young entrepreneurs. He was brilliant, kind, and refreshingly genuine in a world full of people trying to impress each other with inflated accomplishments. David ran his own tech consulting firm and understood the challenges of building a business from scratch. More than that, he truly saw me in a way my family never had. Our relationship developed naturally over shared late-night work sessions, coffee meetings that turned into dinner dates, and conversations about our dreams for the future. David never made me feel like I had to compete for his attention or prove my worth. He celebrated my successes without trying to diminish them or redirect focus to his own achievements. For the first time in my life, I experienced what it felt like to be someone's priority. When David proposed 18 months later, I was genuinely surprised by my family's reaction. My mother immediately began planning an elaborate wedding, suddenly interested in every detail of my life. My father offered to contribute financially, something he had never done for any of my previous milestones. Even Jessica seemed excited, volunteering to help with planning and repeatedly telling me how happy she was for me. Their sudden attention felt strange after years of indifference, but I wanted to believe it was genuine. Maybe my success had finally earned their respect. Maybe they had realized how poorly they had treated me and wanted to make amends. Maybe this wedding could be the turning point in our family relationships. I should have known better. The wedding planning process revealed that their newfound interest wasn't about celebrating my happiness. It was about maintaining appearances and positioning themselves at the center of what they perceived as a glamorous event. My mother took over most of the planning, making decisions without consulting me and dismissing my preferences as impractical or too expensive. When I suggested a smaller, more intimate ceremony, she acted as if I had personally insulted her. Jessica appointed herself as my maid of honor without being asked, then proceeded to plan a bachelorette party that was more about her social media content than celebrating my upcoming marriage. She invited her friends instead of mine, chose activities I had no interest in, and spent the entire weekend taking selfies while barely acknowledging the supposed guest of honor, Tyler, now 22 and still treating life like an extended vacation funded by our parents, contributed nothing but complaints about having to wear a tuxedo and participate in what he called boring wedding stuff. Yet somehow, every conversation about the wedding eventually centered around accommodating his schedule and preferences. The dress shopping experience encapsulated everything wrong with my family dynamic. I had found the perfect dress at the first boutique we visited. It was elegant, sophisticated, and made me feel beautiful in a way I had never experienced, but Jessica hated it. Too simple, she declared, not dramatic enough for photographs. You need something that makes more of a statement. My mother agreed, and suddenly we were visiting boutique after boutique, looking at dresses that Jessica thought would photograph better or my mother believed were more appropriate for our family status. Every dress I loved was dismissed. Every suggestion I made was overruled. After 6 exhausting shopping trips, I finally put my foot down and ordered the original dress I had fallen in love with. The betrayals were small but constant throughout the planning process. Vendors were given different instructions than what I had requested. Menu items I specifically asked for were changed without my knowledge. The color scheme was altered to better complement Jessica's complexion in photographs. When I confronted my mother about these changes, she would sigh dramatically and remind me that weddings are stressful for everyone, not just the bride. But I endured it all because I believed that on the actual wedding day, none of the planning drama would matter. I would marry David, surrounded by people who loved us, and begin our life together as partners. The dress would be beautiful, the ceremony would be meaningful, and for once in my life, I would be the center of positive attention from my family. 3 weeks before the wedding, I received the call that should have been a warning sign. Jessica was sobbing hysterically, barely coherent through her tears. She had been fired from her marketing job for what she claimed was office politics, but what sounded suspiciously like poor performance and attitude problems. Her rent was due, her credit cards were maxed out, and she needed money immediately to avoid eviction. My parents had already given her everything they could spare, she claimed. Could I possibly help her out? Just until she found another job? She promised to pay me back as soon as she got back on her feet. It would mean the world to her to know that her sister cared enough to help during her darkest hour. Against my better judgment, I transferred $5,000 to her account. It represented a significant chunk of my wedding budget, money I had earmarked for the honeymoon, but Jessica was family. And despite everything, I still hoped that helping her might finally create the sisterly bond I had always wanted. She never thanked me properly, never followed up to let me know how the money had helped, never mentioned paying me back. When I saw her Instagram posts from expensive restaurants and shopping trips in the days that followed, I realized I had been played. But confronting her seemed petty, especially with the wedding so close. I decided to let it go and focus on the positive aspects of my upcoming marriage. The morning of my wedding dawned bright and clear, a perfect September day that seemed to promise happiness ahead. I had slept surprisingly well, waking up refreshed and genuinely excited about marrying David and celebrating with our friends and family. As I got ready in the bridal suite at the venue, surrounded by my bridesmaids and family members, I felt optimistic about the day ahead. The morning preparations went smoothly. My hair looked perfect, my makeup was flawless, and when I finally stepped into my wedding dress, I felt like the most beautiful version of myself. The dress fit perfectly, the beading caught the light beautifully, and for the first time during the entire wedding planning process, everything felt exactly right. That feeling lasted exactly 23 minutes. Jessica had been acting strangely all morning, making comments about how some people get everything handed to them while others have to struggle. She kept mentioning how expensive everything looked, how lucky I was to be able to afford such an elaborate wedding, how nice it must be to have such a successful business. Her tone was bitter, but I attribute it to stress about her job situation and tried to redirect the conversation toward more positive topics. Looking back, I should have seen the signs. The way she was drinking champagne faster than everyone else. The increasingly sharp edge to her comments. The way she kept staring at my dress with an expression I couldn't quite read. But I was focused on my own happiness, trusting that my family would want to celebrate this moment with me rather than sabotage it. I was wrong. The photographer had just finished taking pictures of me with my bridesmaids when Jessica suddenly announced she needed to talk to me privately. Something urgent about the ceremony timeline, she claimed. I should have been suspicious, but weddings are chaotic, and last-minute issues are normal. I followed her outside to the small garden area behind the bridal suite, still in my full wedding dress, train carefully arranged to avoid the morning dew on the grass. What happened next unfolded so quickly that my brain struggled to process it in real time. Jessica started talking rapidly about how unfair everything was, how I had always gotten the easy path while she had to struggle, how my success was just luck while her failures were somehow my fault. Her voice grew louder and more aggressive with each word, but I was still trying to be the understanding sister, the peacemaker who could calm the situation. Then she grabbed the skirt of my wedding dress. Before I could react, before I could even understand what was happening, Jessica yanked hard on the delicate fabric and threw the entire bottom portion of my dress directly into a muddy puddle that had formed from the sprinkler system running earlier that morning. The beautiful ivory silk immediately soaked up the dirty water, brown stains spreading across the intricate beadwork that had taken months to complete. I stood there in complete shock, watching my dream dress absorbing mud and grass stains, while my sister screamed about how I didn't deserve any of the good things in my life. The other bridesmaids came running when they heard the commotion, gasping in horror at the sight of my ruined gown. My mother appeared seconds later, took one look at the situation, and immediately began defending Jessica. "She's been under so much stress lately," my mother said, as if stress justified destroying someone's wedding dress. "You know how emotional she gets when she's overwhelmed. I'm sure it was just an accident. She'll help you clean it up, won't you, Jessica?" But Jessica wasn't apologetic. She wasn't embarrassed or remorseful. She was triumphant. Standing there with mud splattered on her bridesmaid dress, she looked satisfied in a way that made my blood run cold. This hadn't been an impulsive act driven by emotion. This had been deliberate, calculated, designed to inflict maximum damage at the moment when I was most vulnerable. The wedding coordinator appeared with towels and stain remover, frantically trying to assess whether the dress could be salvaged. The photographer awkwardly documented the chaos, unsure whether to keep shooting or give us privacy. My other bridesmaids stood around helplessly, offering comfort and suggestions that couldn't fix what had been destroyed. In that moment, surrounded by chaos and betrayal, something crystallized for me with perfect clarity. This wasn't just about a ruined dress. This was the culmination of 25 years of psychological warfare disguised as family dysfunction. Jessica hadn't destroyed my wedding dress in a moment of emotional breakdown. She had destroyed it because she couldn't tolerate seeing me happy, successful, and celebrated. My family's pattern had always been to diminish my achievements, dismiss my feelings, and redirect attention away from my successes. But this attack was different. This was active sabotage designed to ruin what should have been the happiest day of my life. And they expected me to forgive it, minimize it, and move on without consequence because that's what I had always done before. Standing there in my mud-stained dress, I made a decision that would change everything. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't beg Jessica to explain why she would do such a thing. Instead, I smiled. Not a bitter smile or a sarcastic smile, but a genuine expression of clarity and determination. Because in that moment of ultimate betrayal, I finally understood something crucial about my relationship with my family. Their toxicity wasn't my responsibility to manage anymore. I called David immediately, explained the situation calmly, and told him we had two choices. We could postpone the wedding until I could find another dress, or we could proceed with the ceremony as planned and let everyone see exactly what my family was capable of. David, bless him, didn't hesitate for a second. "If you're ready to marry me in that dress, or any dress, I'm ready to marry you right now." The wedding coordinator managed to clean the worst of the mud from the visible parts of my dress, but the damage was extensive and obvious. I walked down that aisle with brown stains on my train and grass marks on my skirt, and I had never felt more beautiful or more powerful, because every guest could see what had happened, and more importantly, they could see how I was handling it. I didn't make excuses for my family. I didn't try to minimize the situation or protect Jessica from the natural consequences of her actions. When people asked what happened to my dress, I told them the truth. My sister threw it in a mud puddle 30 minutes before the ceremony. The shocked expressions and uncomfortable silence that followed said everything about how normal people react to such behavior. The ceremony itself was perfect despite the drama. David and I exchanged vows that felt more meaningful because we were declaring our commitment to each other in the aftermath of such obvious family dysfunction. We were choosing to build something healthy and supportive together, in direct contrast to the toxicity we had just experienced. During the reception, I watched my parents scramble to manage the social fallout from Jessica's behavior. They made excuses, changed the subject when people asked questions, and tried to minimize the incident as a silly misunderstanding between sisters. But the damage to their reputation was done. Everyone had seen their true character, and no amount of spin could undo that revelation. Jessica spent most of the reception sulking at the bar, avoiding eye contact with anyone who had witnessed her meltdown. She left early without saying goodbye, and several family friends made pointed comments about her absence during the traditional speeches and toasts. The contrast between her behavior and the genuine warmth from David's family was stark and impossible to ignore. But here's what my family didn't know, what they couldn't have anticipated when they planned their latest attempt to undermine my happiness. The business I had built, while they dismissed and ignored me, had grown far beyond their comprehension. The shy middle child they had overlooked was now running a multi-million-dollar company with national recognition and industry awards. 3 days before the wedding, I had received confirmation of the largest contract in my company's history. A Fortune 500 corporation had chosen us over several major advertising agencies to handle their complete digital transformation. The contract was worth $2.3 million over 18 months, with potential for expansion into additional markets. I hadn't told anyone in my family about this development because I had learned years ago that sharing good news with them only provided ammunition for future attacks. They would either minimize the achievement or find ways to take credit for it. But sitting at my wedding reception, watching them scramble to manage their embarrassment while I celebrated the biggest professional victory of my career, I felt a sense of justice that was almost overwhelming. The Monday after our honeymoon, I received another call that would change everything. The Fortune 500 client was so impressed with our initial proposals that they wanted to discuss acquiring my company outright, not just hiring us for projects, but purchasing the entire operation as part of their internal marketing division. The conversation that followed was surreal. Numbers that had seemed impossible just months earlier were being discussed as starting points for negotiation. My little social media side business that my parents had dismissed as computer nonsense was suddenly worth more money than they could comprehend. The acquisition process took 6 weeks of intense due diligence, legal reviews, and strategic planning. When the final paperwork was signed, I walked away with $4.2 million in cash and stock options that could potentially double that amount over the next 5 years. At 26 years old, I had built and sold a company for more money than my parents had earned in their entire careers combined. The irony wasn't lost on me that my family's years of neglect and dismissal had been the exact motivation I needed to build something extraordinary. Their inability to see my potential had forced me to prove it to myself. Their refusal to support my dreams had made me self-reliant and determined. Their constant criticism had given me thick skin and unwavering confidence in my abilities. Jessica's attack on my wedding dress hadn't broken me. It had freed me from any remaining obligation to maintain relationships with people who actively worked against my happiness. The mud stains on my dress had washed out eventually, but the clarity I gained that day was permanent. Within a month of the acquisition, David and I had purchased a house in an upscale neighborhood across town. We didn't tell my family we were moving until after we had settled into our new home. When my mother called to complain about finding out through mutual friends, I explained calmly that we were building a life surrounded by people who supported our success rather than sabotaged it. The distance wasn't just geographical. It was emotional, psychological, and spiritual. I was done trying to earn love and respect from people who were fundamentally incapable of giving either. I was done making excuses for their behavior or minimizing their impact on my mental health. I was done being the family scapegoat who absorbed their dysfunction while they maintained their illusions of normalcy. The transformation wasn't immediate, but it was profound. For the first time in my adult life, I stopped checking my phone obsessively for messages from family members. I stopped feeling guilty about my success or downplaying my achievements in conversations. Most importantly, I stopped carrying the emotional weight of their dysfunction as if it were somehow my responsibility to fix. David and I settled into our new life with an ease that surprised both of us. Our house became a sanctuary where success was celebrated rather than resented, where accomplishments were shared without fear of sabotage, where we could build something beautiful without worrying about who might try to tear it down. The contrast to my childhood home was so stark, it felt like living in a different universe entirely. The business sale had given me financial freedom, but more importantly, it had given me something I had never experienced before: complete independence from my family's opinion of me. Their approval or disapproval no longer had any bearing on my self-worth or my future plans. For someone who had spent 26 years seeking validation from people incapable of giving it, this freedom was intoxicating. 6 months after the wedding, my mother called with what she clearly thought was devastating news. Jessica had been evicted from her apartment and needed a place to stay. Could she possibly move in with David and me temporarily, just until she got back on her feet again? It would mean so much to the family if I could help during this difficult time. The old Sarah might have said yes, despite every instinct screaming not to. The old Sarah would have rationalized that family helps family, that holding grudges was petty, that maybe this crisis could finally bring us together. The new Sarah had learned that enabling destructive behavior isn't kindness. It's cowardice disguised as virtue. I told my mother no. Not maybe. Not let me think about it. Not if Jessica apologizes first. Just no. I explained calmly that Jessica's housing situation was not my responsibility, especially given her behavior at my wedding. I suggested they look into local rental assistance programs or temporary housing options, but I would not be providing financial or emotional support for someone who had deliberately tried to destroy my happiness. My mother's reaction was predictable. How could I be so cold toward my own sister? How could I hold one mistake against family? What would people think if they knew I had refused to help during Jessica's time of need? The guilt tactics that had worked so effectively throughout my childhood bounced off me like water off glass. What people will think, I replied evenly, is that actions have consequences. Jessica made her choice when she destroyed my wedding dress. I'm making mine by protecting my peace and my marriage from further toxicity. That was 3 years ago, and I've never looked back. Today, David and I run a consulting firm helping other entrepreneurs scale their businesses. We've invested in real estate, traveled the world, and built the kind of life I used to dream about during those lonely childhood nights when I felt invisible and unwanted. The mud stains washed out of my wedding dress, but the lesson was permanent. Sometimes the people who hurt you most give you exactly the motivation you need to build something extraordinary. If you're dealing with toxic family members who try to sabotage your success, remember this: their inability to celebrate you says nothing about your worth and everything about their character. Your value isn't determined by people who refuse to see it. Have you ever had to cut toxic family members out of your life? Share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, smash that like button, subscribe for more stories of transformation and success. And remember that sometimes the best revenge is simply living well. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.